Well, another year of Haslab campaigns has come and gone. We had 5 more this year, and only 2 of them actually got funded. This was not the runaway success that Hasbro was hoping for, so let's discuss what went wrong with Haslab in 2022.
It's morphin' time!
Hello, this is Soundout here, and before we begin, I have to put up some disclaimers, because talking about Haslab seems to generate a lot of heat online. First things first, I do not work for Hasbro nor Mattel. I do not work in the toy industry. I have not ever worked in the toy industry professionally. I am simply someone who's been doing YouTube about toys for 14 years, and everything I know about the industry comes from not only watching, reading, and listening to interviews of people who have worked in the industry, but I have actually helped co-interview Kyle Wodega of Super 7 on some of these topics, and some of that information will come from the interview there. If you want to see that, I will link that below. If there is something I say that says that it's related to the industry and you want to debate what I am saying, I will have a civil discussion about it in the comments below. But I am coming at this from a broad perspective after gathering many sources together to find correlating information to know how things work in the industry versus individual companies. Adding to that, a channel I recommend checking out is Spectre Creative, because he talks about things in the toy industry from a perspective of working in the toy industry. Scott Knightlick has been in the industry for a long time, most famously in charge of Masters Universe Classics and DC Universe Classics at Mattel. So I will link that in the description below, because I think learning about the toy industry adds to these discussions to be more well-informed. Adding to that, comments are open for discussion, but no one attack anybody over their opinions on toys. It's just toys. Don't take it personally if somebody likes or dislikes something that you like or dislike. It's toys. Now, on that note, as we are talking about Haslab, I myself have backed Haslabs. I have obviously backed the Sentinel from Marvel Legends. I have backed Galactus from Marvel Legends. And I have also backed the Transformers Legacy Victory Saber set, which I just did a lengthy video on if you want to check that out. It was only 2 days ago, so it's definitely recent. In terms of other Haslabs that haven't shipped yet, the G.I. Joe Sky Striker, the Cobra HISS, and Deathsarus are all ones I backed, as well as the Marvel Legends Ghost Rider set, which also wasn't one that made it forward. So in terms of me talking about the experience of being a Haslab customer, I can say that firsthand. The experience of having financial stake in the success or failure of these, absolutely not. I don't work for Hasbro or Mattel. I don't worry about their financials. That is their thing. I am just here to observe, analyze, and report on what has happened in 2022. So let's get to it. So as we talked about last year, Haslab has been successful and rolling out sort of hit after hit. There was the Jabba sail barge that kicked it off, and then there's been several other successes throughout. Obviously, we got Sentinel, Galactus, Victory Saber, and more on the way. They tend to have this sort of method of 45-day window. You put in a backing bid saying, I'm going to pay for this at the end of the campaign, and then at the end of the campaign, you get charged the full amount, and then they ship it to you like a year later. That's typically how these go. And what's really kind of fun about it is that you get the chance at getting items that can't make it to retail. And I really want to stress this. There is nothing that has been put at Haslab in terms of the average Haslab that could actually be sold at retail. If Hasbro could sell a 3-foot-tall Galactus at retail, they would, because by selling it at Haslab, they are selling significantly less units than they would at a retail release. This is just a plain fact. A wide release to retail, or even a store-exclusive release, will have much more units than a Haslab. And I'm kind of tired of the online comments where people are like, oh, they could just do this at retail, they don't want to. Oh, they're a big company, they could just sell us at retail. Maybe in the Toys R Us days. Toys R Us was crazy like a fox. They'd take your gigantic 3-foot-long Millennium Falcon item. Stores nowadays aren't interested in that, because the stores that we have are, well, Walmart, Target. And then in terms of online retailers, you get Amazon, and then everybody else is too small to really make a huge impact. So when you're talking about something like a 3-foot-tall Sentinel or a 3-foot-tall Galactus or a really complex Transformer that's based on an obscure anime, this is not stuff that could sell at retail, because retailers would have to first be interested in carrying it. And so that's why it goes to Haslab, because if it could be at retail, it would. And in terms of Haslab as a concept, do I think it's working? Yes, but also not. We're going to talk about how this year's Haslabs was not a success. Last year, 4 out of the 5 Haslabs were successful. This year, only 2 were successful. That's really, really bad. Especially because this year, Hasbro set up a dedicated Haslab team. It's been mentioned by live streams talking about every Haslab so far that there is a Haslab team that oversees Haslab that works with the designers of each brand to get the Haslab projects together. And if that's the case, their first outing, if their first outing was this year, not last year, their first outing this year was not good. And we're going to break it down. The last thing I do want to say in the sort of preamble section is that when it comes to Haslab, I think the biggest thing that still needs to change and still needs to be worked on, payment plans. I think that if people could pay these not just in one chunk, but in payments of 3 to 6, that would be excellent. Mattel's Castle Eternia project, which we will also be talking about in this video, had a payment plan. They're a big corporation just like Hasbro, and it's not like a small company like Super 7 where they put up an item without sort of a tier thing because they're like, oh, we'll make sure we get at least the minimum because we know our market. You know, they offered a payment plan on the Turtle Van or the Thunder Tank or Snake Mountain. That was a little different because they're a smaller company, so I thought, okay, maybe the bigger companies can't because of corporate overhead. Seems to be just a Hasbro problem if Mattel was willing to offer a payment plan. I think some of these Haslabs could be more successful if people didn't have to pay that full amount right away. Give them an option to pay in partials. Because I think that as we are going forward, and we'll be talking about price and the reason why some of these failed, a payment plan would have alleviated a lot of the problems. But let's talk about each Haslab one at a time from 2022. So the first Haslab of the year was Reva's lightsaber from Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Force Effects Elite version, which ran from May 27th to July 11th. So there was no Haslabs for the first 4 months, which was pretty nice considering they put 3 out on top of each other between October and December 2021. This was supposed to go for $499. It needed 5,000 backers. It gained 1,413. That is a failure rate of 28.26%. There were no extra stretch goal tiers. There was no early bird purchase offer. This was just, hey, if you want this lightsaber, back it and we will make it. Now, why did this fail? Okay, the Force Effects lightsaber line for Star Wars The Black Series has been popular. They pump them out all the time. They usually run about $230 to $260 depending on the design. So $500 for a 2-bladed lightsaber isn't too out of the ordinary for the pricing. However, there's some problems we need to talk about. First of all, it did feature fancy light effects and motion sounds more so than the standard Force Effects lightsabers, which is cool. It can be configured into multiple forms, as the Inquisitor lightsabers are known for. However, it lacked the spinning feature that Inquisitor sabers are really known for. That kind of hold in the center and the blades spin around thing was a big thing in Star Wars Rebels, where the Inquisitors debuted. It carried forward to Jedi Fallen Order, and in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, lightsabers spun twice. It was a very bad point of contention for me, because why do you have the thing known for being a spinning lightsaber, and they only did the spinning twice? It was really lame, and that was in general, the Inquisitors in live action were kinda lame. This is another problem, because this item went up for sale the day that Obi-Wan Kenobi premiered. So the lightsaber, which is specifically Reva, the third sister Inquisitor's lightsaber, she only debuted that day the Haslab went up. And the show, which was only 6 episodes, had to sell you on her in order for you to want to spend $500 on her lightsaber. No nostalgia tie-in, no build-up demand. It was, do you want this? And I think that was the mistake. And infamously, the Star Wars fandom attacked the actress playing Reva because, well, she's a black woman in a sci-fi franchise. This seems to always happen and it needs to stop. And in terms of the actual product, did it affect it? I don't know, because even people that liked Reva weren't really rushing to spend $500 on her lightsaber. I found the character to be really interesting, and over the course of the series, I'd grown to really like what they were doing with the character. But I wasn't really ready to spend $500 on her lightsaber. I bought her Black Series figure, that was about it. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a $500 lightsaber. And I think that was the problem. The price was just too high for what it was. If this Inquisitor lightsaber was one of the other Inquisitors, ones from Rebels, whether it was Fifth Brother or Grand Inquisitor, maybe it would have sold a little better, but I don't think it was going to make it. It's just too niche of a niche. Because I think the Force Effects lightsabers, they pretty much are online-only things. You don't see those in stores. so I don't think the market was that big for them. In terms of the overall price and the release, I think it was restricted by Disney, because Disney licensing fees are kind of nuts. Thanks, Bob Chapek. But the problem is that we have higher price and then limited availability. You could only get the Reva Lightsaber Haslab from Hasbro Pulse websites. There weren't any other retail partners selling it, which means you were sort of limited to US, Canada, and some parts of Europe. So maybe if they wanted 5,000 backers, more people should have been able to buy it. But maybe they couldn't because of Disney licensing. Things to think about. Now on the flip side, let's talk about one of the most successful Haslabs of all time, the classified series Cobra HISS. This campaign ran from June 29th to August 15th. It was a $299.99 price, needed 8,000 backers. Its final total was 26,772 backers. Hasbro must have been really happy with that. It had a success rate of 321.75%. Now, this is what's interesting about this one. It introduced what I think doomed a lot of other campaigns, the early bird figure. Because yes, the early bird figure of the HISS Tactician, which could have been in 6 different colors, there was a poll, and the Tactician Bravo was chosen with the black of the red symbol. That was a cool idea. It was, oh hey, the HISS tank comes with a figure, you can get another figure if we reach the base goal within the first week. And it made its goal in less than 12 hours. Which is really impressive. This went on to have future tiers, such as at 10,000 we got 2 missile racks added, at 12,000 a retro canopy and armor plating, at 14,000 weapon accessories as well as a HISS gunner figure, and at 16,000 they're adding in a Cobra Commander figure, which is going to be painted like the misprint of the old figure, and I imagine this mold is going to get some sort of retail release with the correct symbol, and it just kept going after that. It was a very successful campaign. However, with the early bird figure, a lot of this got funded in the first week, and so essentially your numbers went like this and just sort of sat about here. And then it gained really quick at the end because people jumped in. Now, why did this one do well? Well, there are a few reasons. First of all, G.I. Joe Classified Series, despite G.I. Joe having only one media tie-in being the comic book that just ended last month, it's doing really well. Like, the toy line is popular because the figures are really good. So to make a large-scale vehicle to go with those figures has been a success. The G.I. Joe Sky Striker Haslab missed its last tier, probably because of how many Haslabs were on top of each other in the last part of 2021, but also because the 3.75-inch collectors are the old collectors. Those of us who've been collecting G.I. Joe prior to Classified. The Classified people were like, I'm not that interested because it's not classified. So they definitely showed up in bulk. Also, the campaign ran during the summertime when shipping was slower and things were getting delayed, and more specifically, only like 5 G.I. Joe figures shipped during the campaign. So theoretically, if you only had so much money to spend on G.I. Joe, you could afford yourself a HISS tank and the figures that came out. Which that is a factor as well. There also was more regional availability, but not as much as it could be. So the fact it still got to 27,000 backers is kind of amazing. And yeah, that's just essentially the HISS tank. G.I. Joe's popular, it made it work. However, I think Hasbro looked at that and said, oh, the early bird figure gets us backed quicker and gets us to those stretch goals quicker and makes us more successful. That's not the case, and let's talk about that. The next Haslab was another one to fail, the Marvel Legends Ghost Rider Engine of Vengeance Haslab. Which, if you've been following the channel, you know I was super excited about because I love the Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider, and this was our chance to get it, and it's gone. It's gone. This went really bad. This is probably the longest segment in the video, not just because I'm really invested, but because there's a lot of bad things to talk about. First of all, the campaign ran from September 16th to October 31st. That was significant because a lot of Marvel Legends shipped in that time frame. Like 50 new Legends started shipping from multiple retailers in like October, which is not good because if your audience is buying your retail stuff and your other exclusives, they're not going to have money for your Haslab, especially when you have to pay in full at the end of the date. I think the reason why the timing was done for that was because Marvel's Midnight Suns, which prominently features the Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider as a character, it was supposed to be out October 2nd, and it got delayed till December 2nd because they needed more time to optimize the game. It worked out in the long run, but the Haslab, I think, suffered a little bit from it, but sales data isn't out for this game yet, so I don't know how well it sold. Tactical strategy games are not the hottest sellers, so I don't know if it would have helped the campaign, but media tie-ins are media tie-ins. But anyways, the campaign itself was going to be $349.99, which for a lot of people was too much. It was too much for a car with flame effects, with all the accessories, with 20 LEDs, with a pack-in figure that has a full accessory loadout. For me, I was like, yeah, I'm in. But then again, it probably could have been any price and I would have been in because I wanted the character. Now, it needed 9,000 backers for its base goal. It only got 5,060. This was a failure rate of 56.22%. In terms of additional figures, we had a early bird figure, which was the Robbie Reyes on Ghost Rider. It was just a Robbie Reyes civilian figure to go with the fact the car could be made into a non-flaming car. You put the regular Robbie in there. Cool idea. Probably should have just been in the base package because the early bird ruined this. And I'll talk about that in a moment. The other tiers were the most poorly thought out for the campaign that they could have been and may have shown a bit of overconfidence from the Marvel team. The tiers included, tier 1 at 10K would have been Goblin Queen, aka Madeline Pryor. That's an X-Men villain. Tier 2, 11K, Damon Hellstrom is not that well known. I don't think would sell a Haslab. And tier 3 at 12K was going to be Mephisto, who's one of the more prominent Marvel villains who I wish would stop showing up in every comic I'm reading. But I digress. He is one of the more prominent Marvel villains, longtime character. So all three of the tiers were longtime legacy characters that people would know from multiple eras. The main tier was a guy that debuted in 2014 and has only, to this date, has only had 2 solo books, one that ran 12 issues, one that ran 6, that was also a team book with Wolverine and Hulk. This is I think the crux of the problem. Robbie Reyes as Ghost Rider and his cool flaming Dodge Charger is awesome. I love the character, I love the stories they've told. His comic book don't sell that well, apparently, because they've only given him 2 solo books since he debuted in 2014. And neither have run that long. I love these. These are some of my favorite Marvel books of the modern day, but they're niche. It's definitely a niche topic. So what caused this to fail? Marvel with Galactus sold a ton of units despite a $400 price tag. Why didn't this sell? Well, let's point to some of the common complaints. First of all, oh, it's too modern of a Haslab. They should do classic stuff. They did 2 modern ones and they sold incredibly well. That Sentinel is the 2019 Powers of X design. The Galactus is the more modern 2010s design of Galactus. It's just because the Sentinel and Galactus have been around for decades that people would know them regardless of what design they're using. And that's kind of the problem that comes with the Ghost Rider, because most people associate Ghost Rider with a motorcycle because his media appearances in movies was with a Ghost Rider and the motorcycle, whereas he had a longer appearance in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 4 as Robbie Reyes with the car. But Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. just seems to get left behind in all the MCU stuff, even though it's one of its better shows. So let's add to this. Limited availability in other regions, probably due to Disney. Price, probably due to Disney. The shifting plan. This was kind of a problem, and this is going to come up again. The original tier order was Mephisto, then the others, and then they shifted it to put Goblin Queen, then Hellstrom, then Mephisto, which was just, they had to change the plan because the numbers weren't going up. The other thing, too, is when the early bird failed, they turned around and were like, oh, well, we'll include the Robbie Reyes head if it goes through with the base figure. And then people were like, oh, so none of the thing you're telling us is true, which is not the case. They're adjusting a campaign. This is a campaign. It's not a pre-order. It's a pre-order campaign. So as a design team and as a marketing team, they have to shift it as it's going. This one didn't take off, so they try to adjust it to see if it'll go up. The other problem that happened was that a bunch of people started backing it without really wanting multiples. A lot of people started trying to artificially inflate the number to get it past the main goal to get the early bird figure, and then when it didn't make it, there was like hundreds that just dropped out, and then people started dropping out over the campaign, likely because it wasn't going well, and the numbers essentially, they kind of shot up slowly, and then they peaked, and then they just kind of plateaued out. So with this one, people started dropping it because there's too many other Marvel Legends coming in. Ultimately, people were just choosing other characters over Robbie, because Robbie is not as well known as he needed to be. The other thing I'll add to this is that Robbie's fandom, because he is from 2014, is skewing younger, and a younger audience may not have $350 to drop on their favorite Ghost Rider. I was going to barely squeak by, but Nah, that's the thing. I'm 27, okay? If there's Robbie fans younger than me, which there are, early 20s, they're in college, they may not have the room or the price money available yet to buy a Robbie Reyes. This thing was kind of like 8 to 10 years too early. It's just the reality of the age of the character. Now, the other thing that was a problem was that the tiers didn't match the project. With Sentinel, the tiers were accessories for Sentinel. With Galactus, they were the Heralds of Galactus. With Robbie Reyes, it was the stuff they couldn't do at retail. They admitted this in an interview. Mephisto, Goblin Queen, Hellstrom, they couldn't do those at retail, otherwise they would have, because of concerns with Walmart and Target, or Hasbro as a company, or Disney. They didn't want those on the shelf. They don't want to be just selling an action figure of the devil, basically, with Mephisto. If they could have done Mephisto at retail, they would have, and they couldn't, so they put it here. That was the thing that I don't think people quite realized when they were like, we don't want that. They'll just release Mephisto at retail if this fails. I don't think he's coming. We may have been doomed out of a few characters with this whole thing, which kind of sucks because that's just the reality. In terms of the price, I think the price was higher for what you were getting proportionately than Galactus, because when Galactus went up, figures were $22.99. When Ghost Rider went up, figures were $24.99 to $26.49. The last thing that I think hurt this campaign was the fandom. And this is a call out, not specifically to any single person, but the fandom in general got really nasty about this. And this is not coming from a Robbie Reyes fan who was disappointed in the car. This is coming from a person who wants to be a decent human being to others and treat people respectfully. There was a lot of YouTubers, a lot of thumbnails that were drawing dumb images over the faces of the design team and the marketing team. There were people calling them stupid, people calling them deceptive and liars. And there was also one person in particular that was throwing racist insults at two of the members of the team, even down to doing it in person at New York Comic Con. And that is absolutely shameful, and anyone that had participated in that kind of behavior should be ashamed of themselves. The design teams that we see are the people that had to take the brunt of corporate decisions. Do you think the Marvel Legends team wanted to charge $350 for the car with Robbie Reyes? No, they would love to sell it cheaper. Every toy manufacturer would love for things to be cheaper, especially on the design side. They want people to enjoy what they made. But the reality of manufacturing, as well as in the case of Hasbro, the corporate structure, means they can't always do that. And just because they can't tell you every single part of how the process works, doesn't mean they're lying to you, because they work for a corporation. Corporations have rules and restrictions. If they told us exactly everything that happened behind the scenes, they would get in trouble and they could get fired. And they don't want to do that. It's job security. So at the end of the day, the racist comments were horrible and should never have ever happened. This is toys. It's frickin' toys. Why do people get so upset about their toys? When you go attacking others, particularly ones who are on design teams working at major corporations, you're losing touch. The whole phrase on the internet is go touch grass. I don't know, go out and smell the roses is another good one. Just go outside and get out of your bubble and don't attack people who are making the stuff, because the people we see are not the part of the problems we have with the lines. A lot of those decisions are above their heads and we'll never see those people because they're safe in their offices. And on that soapbox moment out of the way, we have two more Haslabs to talk about for the year. In 2021, Hasbro ran a very successful Heroquest Haslab. This worked sort of like a Kickstarter because unlike the other Haslabs where there was a backer total, that Haslab let you buy a $100 package or $150 package, and the overall money that was spent was what guaranteed the sales and the tiers and all that. So they had a $1 million goal, they made over $3 million, and you could pick one of the two bundles. Now this was interesting because this also was the only Haslab to be released at retail in some form. The Heroquest board game system was essentially getting kickstarted by the Haslab, and then it went to retail later with future expansions, and some of the stuff that was in the Haslab was only in the Haslab. So in an effort to repeat the success of the Avalon Hill brand with Heroquest, they put up the Haslab Heroscape. This one, I don't even think people even realized happened. I only remember it because I have been researching this stuff for months. Heroscape went up October 1st and ended November 15th. The price was $249.99. It needed 8,000 backers. Its final total was 4,353 backers. failure rate of 54.41%. Early bird tier they had no early birds, and their tier unlocks were at 10K, 12K, 14K, 15K, 16K, and all of those were additional figures to be added to the game. Now this one was different. First of all, you heard me say a solid price and not a number goal. This worked completely different from the Heroquest one. This was actually a backer goal, it was a base package, you couldn't change it. And I think that sort of turned people away. Also, the highest price on the Heroquest was $150, and this was $250? Yeah, okay, so the whole thing with Heroscape was that it's supposed to be 3D plastic environments, which is cool, but that's also really expensive. But then looking at what you get in this Haslab compared to other board game companies and how they do three-dimensional like landscapes, personally, as someone who does engage in board games as a casual level, I thought that was too much for what was included. And I thought the stretch goals weren't that interesting. It's just bonus miniatures. It really didn't feel like a fully formed campaign, and it wasn't so much a slam dunk that Heroquest was. And for a lot of people, they may have looked at that and gone, oh, well, they released the base package for Heroquest at retail, maybe they'll release the Heroscape one later. Yeah, this was kind of a mistake, and I think that ultimately changing the structure like that and having such a high price package as the only tier is what caused it to fail. Board game people like options. So we end on a success story. The Transformers Legacy Haslab Deathsarus. Now this is the companion piece to Victory Saber. Victory Saber is of course the leader of the Autobots in Transformers Victory. Deathsaurus is the leader of the Decepticons. They are the rivals, they fight each other constantly throughout the show, and it overall just made sense. The Victory Saber Haslab was insanely successful, far beyond its final goal, and guess what? Deathsaurus was more successful. I honestly pegged this guy to come in under Victory Saber because I figured not everybody got Victory Saber would get Deathsaurus, but it seems like more people did. This may have been from fear of missing out on the original Victory Saber project. It also may be because Deathsaurus was never made in the Masterpiece line, and at the size he is, he would match the Masterpiece Star Saber. This campaign was $179.99, the exact same price as Victory Saber a year before, which is good. It needed 11,000 backers. It finished with 27,442 backers, which is 1,231 more than Victory Saber did. There was no early bird, and the tiers were simple. A 14,000 tier, which added accessories such as the living metal destroying cannon, blast effects, as well as his metal flail. And tier 2 at 17,000 was the throne/stand. A stand that you could swap a throne into, because Deathsaurus did sit around for most of Victory. After the campaign ended, an email went out to backers that said, thank you for this being such a success. We've added a last secret tier, which was the Micromasters Peepo and Boater, which is an ambulance, because the ambulance sound onomatopoeia in Japanese is Peepo, Peepo, and Boater because he's a boat. So these two were added last minute. And this was a surprise because these are two brand new mold Micromasters, so unlike Holly and Fire included in Victory Saber, these are new. We never had these molds before. And it completes the main 4 Microfasters, or Multiforce, from Victory. So that's exciting because I think we're actually getting really, really close to having everybody that appeared in Victory, which is kind of amazing for being the third and quote-unquote least successful of the original Transformers animes, even though I think it's much more beloved than Master Force at this point. But overall, Deathsaurus was a runaway success, absolutely showing that Transformers has been more successful each time it's done it. And I'm curious to see where Transformers will go next because they said they're doing something for the 40th anniversary and it won't be Victory related. Well, we'll see what happens because if they try to do another big dude like Unicron, I'm out. I don't want too many more big dudes in my collection. I've already got a couple big ones here. And with Transformers, I already got Titan class dudes. I got like 9 Titan class figures to try to fit. I can't add anybody too big. So we'll see what they do. I did run a poll on one of my recent live streams, which was essentially which Japanese Transformer would you like to see as a Haslab? In my audience, 50% of them said Diatlas would be a good pick. So, hey, Hasbro, if you're watching, Diatlas is something we all want. But in terms of Transformers, it seems like they know how to do a Haslab. Why was it different? Well, price was good, and most importantly, you could buy this thing in almost any place on the planet. Okay, there was like so many retailers involved, so many additional international retailers, so many options outside of Hasbro Pulse that almost anybody could back it if they wanted to in their region, which was really great. Plus, every Monday there was a nice little bump in numbers as they added more international orders. Now, they never said hey, we're doing a secret tier. They never said, oh, we'll do another secret tier again, so no one should expect them to do it again. This may have been one of those cases where they were looking at the numbers, saw the tracking, said, wow, this thing's going to really exceed our expectations. We should add something. And they whipped up the 3D renders of MicroMasters and said, all right, here's what you're going to get as a bonus, because those are definitely digital renders. They probably don't have any physical samples yet. But it's cool and exciting that they threw in something extra because of how well it did. But we should not expect that for the future because there is no guarantee that'll ever happen again. Now, of course, this wasn't the only large toy campaign this year. These 5 were Hasbro's. Now, other companies have been putting up large items, and those work on different things. Smaller companies, Kickstarter, that's all different. But when we're talking about big corporations, Mattel came to bat with Castle Eternia. This is a recreation of the original vintage Eternia playset from 1987. It's the biggest playset probably ever made next to the USS Flag from G.I. Joe, and they made it bigger on this new Master of the Universe Origins version. People in the Master of the Universe fandom have been wanting this for decades. Those that grew up in the original line may not have had a chance to get this. It is estimated that only about 4,000 original Eternia playsets exist in actual production. They weren't really made to be sold. They were made to be put on the shelf to say, hey, look, Master of the Universe is still healthy, when the line was starting to wane in popularity. It was to make stores look good. So the biggest stores would get these big boxes, and it was a good advertising thing for Mattel to say, hey, our brand is still good and healthy. What do you mean our ratings are slipping? And that was the only reason Eternia existed. But for many collectors, they've wanted an Eternia playset for a long time, and finding one complete that isn't broken is nearly impossible. It's really, really hard to get an Eternia playset. So the thing is, if you go on eBay trying to find an original Eternia, it could cost you a couple $1,000s to get a complete unbroken one. So when Mattel put up Castle Eternia for $550, it sold like gangbusters. You want to talk about why some campaigns are more successful than others. Let's talk about what happened with Eternia, because it wasn't a runaway, but it was still a success. Price was $550, which is a lot, because you also had to pay $50 in shipping. So this is like $600. Let's just start saying it's $600. It needed 5,000 backers. It finalized with 9,291 backers, which means there's 5,291 plus extra units of this than the original, which is kind of amazing. That also is a low number. It really is. And I think they knew that they'd have to charge an insane amount of money. But more specifically, this thing was going to be so big, because it is too big for my house. I didn't buy one of these. I would have liked to, but I need a second story in this place. I just don't have the room. They knew that there was only going to be so many people that would buy this, so they set their goals low. They raised their price a little higher, knew that at $600, that is a steal for an Eternia compared to a vintage one. There was an early bird figure of King Grayskull, but only for the backers that backed in the first week. With Hasbro and their early bird, everybody got the early bird as long as it made its initial goal. With Mattel, only those that backed in the first week got King Grayskull. At 8,000, there was a moat monster added, and at 10,000 would have been the Kekler, Leader of the Elders, which is an obscure mini-comics character, as well as everybody would get King Grayskull. Now, this is what happened, okay? We didn't make to the final goal. They only got 9,291, really close to that 10K, but not quite. Because essentially this is what happened. In the first week, we saw Eternia shoot up, and then the week ended, it shot up, it got past 8K to get that moat monster, then it just kind of went whoop, and then it stayed pretty steady because there was less than 10 backers a day for the rest of the campaign. Because what essentially happened was that they took King Grayskull off the table, and people were like, well, why should I back it now? In the last week of the campaign, they said, oh, if we get to 10K, we'll throw in King Grayskull for everybody. But it was too late at that point. See, even Mattel changed their minds because they saw how the campaign was going. Ultimately, the reason why this was successful and did so well despite a $600 price tag, 30 years of demand due to unattainable original toy. It has more stuff, it's bigger, it's a little bit more, I don't know, honestly better. The Master of the Universe fandom has been waiting for like full toy lines for years, and they finally got them, and they're ready to just throw money at anything at this point. The fandom is also older, so they have more money to use for things like toys. And then also, essentially the only thing that hurt it was that early bird. I think it could have gotten to 10K because you would have seen a slow build over time, but taking a figure off the table, it just kind of crashed it, and barely anybody was backing all the way to the end. But there was one thing here that Hasbro doesn't do: payment plans. If you wanted to get this and couldn't afford $600 all at once, you could spread it across 6 payments. And if Hasbro would do that, I think it would really help the success of some of these things. But at the end of the day, the question is, what did we learn from all this? So what did we learn from Haslab as well as Mattel Creation in 2022? First of all, early bird figures don't help anything. They only hurt it. The early bird figure didn't really sell the HISS tank. That's what we can tell, because if early bird figures was why the HISS tank funded so quickly, Ghost Rider would have sold quicker, and the Eternia would have kept going. Thing is, the early bird figures sort of hurt the campaigns, because with the HISS tank, it sold because it was the HISS tank. It's an iconic G.I. Joe vehicle, and there were some people buying 5 of them. I saw people posting about that they were buying like 5 of them. It's an army builder thing. It's like the Sentinel. People bought multiples. They got the money, they got the space, go for it. Nothing's stopping them, right? The HISS tank sold because of the HISS tank, not because it came with an extra figure that we got to vote on the color scheme for. That was fun, but nobody was upset when that wasn't going to be an option, right? It made it, so everyone was like, cool, extra figure. But I don't think if that wasn't included, people would have been that disappointed. With Robbie Reyes, without including the other figure, it sort of threw off the whole 2 modes of the car thing, and so it made a hard sell even harder, because instead of getting an extra, 2 figures within the base package, you're getting 1 with an extra head. Not as enticing. And with Eternia, it completely killed the momentum on it. Because as soon as King Grayskull was off the table, it would have been over. If they had kept King Grayskull as an early bird, where you back it in the first week, and then, everybody gets it, maybe it would have kept climbing, and there would have been that last 700 plus to get it to 10,000. But also, maybe Eternia just peaked out at 9,000. It's entirely possible. Was the King Grayskull from Masters of the Universe Revelation the selling point of a $600 castle that people have been wanting since 1987? I don't think so. It's a nice bonus, and the value of the overall product definitely dropped off when that wasn't available, and that didn't help anything. So at the end of the day, early bird things are not helping anything. Don't bother, because they've hurt 2 campaigns, whereas they don't even probably have helped the other one. The other one just sold because of what it was. The other thing is customers need to feel like they're getting their money's worth with these. With Victory Saber, with Deathsarus, that 180 price, it's a little bit more than a Titan class figure, or now a little bit less than a Titan class figure, but you're getting a fully featured robot. Sentinel is a complete package. Galactus is a complete package with many of his iconic heralds. It works for what they are. The ones that didn't succeed are the ones that are a little too all over the place. The Reva lightsaber didn't have anything bonus to entice you in unless you wanted that lightsaber. The Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider set, 3 of those characters don't even really connect to Robbie Reyes, outside of Hellstrom appeared in a storyline in Avengers with Robbie, but that's about it. Mephisto is more of a Johnny Blaze connection. The tiers should have been other Ghost Riders, so it would have been Ghost Rider themed, instead of just throwing in characters you can't do at retail. Because you got to do that with something that sells the base package, because as much as people want Mephisto, they're not going to buy a $350 card to do it, and that's very clear. And then another thing I think I've noticed is that the campaigns in the fall don't do as well. The HISS tank was over the summer, a summer where there wasn't much other toys to buy, and that made it easier. But in the fall time, when it's heading into Christmas, stores are stocking things left, right, and especially because the shipping delays started to clear up, Hasbro was shipping hundreds of figures between September and December of 2022, and they were also running like Haslabs during that. I don't know how many people dropped out of a Haslab because they couldn't afford it because their pre-orders were coming in, and they wanted those instead. That's something they should really consider. I think Haslab should only happen in the dead period of the year, which is spring and summer and early summer. Late summer, fall, just don't put Haslabs in that. It's a good thing to put on the financial fiscals for the end of the year, but it doesn't help anything and actually hurts the campaigns because Hasbro's essentially competing with themselves by putting Haslabs in that frame. And the last thing is that I hope that everything that happened this year gets analyzed and talked about with the Haslab team. The marketing strategy for Haslab sort of failed it this year, because I think by having stuff go up that wasn't as popular or isn't as well known, like the Lightsaber, like the Heroscape, like the Ghost Rider, they needed a bigger marketing push than they had. People didn't even know the Heroscape one was a thing. I was telling people, oh yeah, another Haslab failed, and they're like, what? What's that one? People didn't talk about it. And I think that's part of the problem too, is that some of these campaigns are a little too soft for the average consumer. Because while there is a lot of fans of Ghost Rider, a lot of fans of Robbie Reyes, there's only so many fans that will spend $350 on the car. And maybe they needed to lower the price, but maybe they couldn't. And so if you can't lower the price, you just got to try to pack it in as much as possible. But the tiers didn't help the Robbie fans, and the Robbie didn't help the fans of the tiers. And that ultimately is where that disconnect happened. So what happened in Haslab in 2022? Was it a failure? Yes. 2 campaigns doing insanely well, while the other 3 underperformed and didn't make their base goal. That is a disaster in my eyes, and I hope things are reassessed. And looking at Castle Eternia, while it had a $600 price tag, which was way more than the other Hasbro stuff, they made their base goal. They made their first stretch goal. They had a payment plan. I hope in 2023, whatever Haslab comes next, Hasbro decides to add payment plans. Because ultimately, we'll probably see another Marvel Haslab because, well, 2 out of 3 ended up going through. Star Wars The Black Series is probably screwed because 2 out of 2 have failed. Vintage collection ones are 2 for 2, so, maybe that's just not the case. And is smaller brands like Power Rangers even going to be able to compete in the Haslab space? I mean, if they can't sell a Dodge Charger from hell, can they sell anything from Power Rangers in a Haslab? Things to think about as a company and things to speculate as fans. But at the end of the day, that does it for our video. That is the end of 2022 Haslabs, and I will look forward to talking about more in the future. We will talk about Haslabs as they pop up on my live streams every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And of course, there'll be more analysis throughout the year. There are also, just as other things to talk about in terms of Hasbro with the annual Soundout Rundown video series in January. We're talking about Marvel Legends, G.I. Joe Classified, Power Rangers Lightning Collection, and Transformers Legacy. It's all Hasbro this year. And honestly, I'm looking forward to doing those videos because I love analyzing an overall broad scope of these things instead of just the little individual parts of it. And if you have any comments or questions, always leave them in the chat below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. Hit subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss out on anything. Check me out on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok if you want to continue the conversation there at Soundout12. Check out my awesome graphic designer on Twitter at DarkClaw643, Hero Club at hero-club.com. And until next time, this is Soundout saying goodbye.